Hello and welcome to the Beef Edge, the Teagasc Beef Podcast, for all your latest news, information and advice for Irish beef farmers. I'm Egan, and on this week's episode, it is the second episode in a regular monthly Beef Masterclass series from expert farmers, and I'm joined by JP Hammersley, a dairy calf to beef farmer from County Tipperary. JP is a participant in the Green Acres calf to beef programme and is operating a Friesian dairy calf to steer system. But first he gave me some background to his farm.
I'm farming in Lattin, just outside Tipperary town. We're part-time farming. We're on a calf to beef system where we're buying in calves at 4 weeks of age and finishing them through to the 28-30-month system. We were buying in kind of 50 calves. We've increased that up now to 70 calves this year, and we'll probably go a little bit more from there. I suppose the one thing that we've been kind of focusing on is buying all our calves off one local dairy farm, and we found that's worked out very well. Worked very well for him and for us, in that we buy in the calves in lots of 10 and 12, so it's easier for me to manage them. I suppose from joining the Green Acres program, we have changed how we're finishing our system. So we've moved to, before we were finishing our system at 28 and 30 month, and now we're going to do a 50-50 split of a 24 month and a 28 month system. I suppose the reason for actually doing that is that the 28 month system is more profitable per head, but to increase the output on the farm, we really needed to increase the kilos per hectare that were produced, and also that would drive on the profitability per hectare as well.
You're buying all the calves from one local farmer. How important of an aspect is that for your business?
Oh, that's hugely important kind of for us, because we're getting in a good healthy calf, a calf that that has been well treated and cared for through their life kind of till we get them. I can see the cow that they're coming from, and I know what kind of an animal I'm going to have when I get to slaughter. I suppose one thing I would see is that if I was to buy a calf inside in the mart, you don't actually know what you're really getting till about their 9 or 10 months, and then you really start seeing their conformation then. So that's kind of one of the big things for me. But also actually then, what helps me is the dairy farm I'm getting them off of has a good level of British Friesian within his herd. So that's kind of about 45% British Friesian, which is a big thing for me. I find that actually I'm getting a good thrive off this breed of an animal.
JP, can you outline how calves are reared on your farm and how you transition them to the outdoor environment?
So the calves will come on the farm when they're 3 or 4 weeks of age. So what we'd first do is we'd vaccinate the calves when they come on site with an intranasal vaccine, and this is something that I kind of would have taken on actually as part of the Green Acres group. We then would have, because I get the calves in batches of 10 and 12, it makes it easier for me to rear them and to watch them in the smaller groups. We would start off actually feeding them twice a day. What I'd normally try doing is weaning at 7 to 8 weeks of age, so we'd start reducing them down close to that time. I suppose my main focus is to develop the rumen, so I would be using I'd be using our kind of ration. What we use is green veil ration actually here. It's a lot of molasses in that ration, so the calves really like it, so they'll eat a lot of it at the start. So I kind of find that's kind of very good for me. And then we'd actually transition them onto nuts. I suppose what we'd also do is we would have a shed with access to a field. So I can then transition those calves onto the next shed where they're getting access to the grass, but also they can be locked in at night if the weather conditions change. And I then move on that group then onto another field afterwards. I do have a mobile shed which can actually hold about 30 calves. So that kind of means that I get a bit greater flexibility around kind of managing my calves. My main focus with the calves is to get them out on grass as quickly as possible and get them eating at least a kilo of ration at the very, very start. And that's the one thing I find has worked very well for me with the calves. and not having them in the same shed means it also reduces any risk of any other diseases that could occur. At least they're broken up into different bundles, and it saves us in that.
Yes, and outline how have calves performed on the farm. So once you turn them out to grass over the grazing season until now that they're coming in to be housed, how have they performed and what targets are you setting?
I suppose where the calves are actually done quite well this year. What we saw at the mid-season, so mid-season weighing, what we do is we'd weigh them 3 times a year at turnout, mid-season and at housing. So our mid-season weights were hitting an average of 171 kilos. That would be about 30 kgs above what the target weights were from Teagasc. So we were quite happy with that now. They were working very well. I suppose our main thing with the calves is that we're constantly giving them fresh grass every day. So we're giving the distance of a stake or two every day, depending on their grass demand, and that's kind of really borne fruit, I think, for us. I suppose where we are at the moment is the calves seem to be doing well. From the targets, live weight gain that we've seen, I suppose up to now we've been seeing a live weight gain of 0.9 of a kilo per day last year, and I suppose looking at that into this year, then we'd be expecting a kind of a weight around 280 kgs on housing, so 1st November. So I'd be kind of happy with those anyway. It'll set us up well actually when we start going into the next stage, and we're not kind of trying to recover kind of lost weight actually during the first season.
The target weights of 0.9 kilos a day are excellent, JP. How have the yearlings that you've turned out this spring performed on your farm during the grazing season, and what targets have you set for them?
Well, the yearlings actually, they were working quite well. We were about 30 kgs above coming out of the housing. 1st of July, we saw a weight of 446 average for those cattle. They were similar enough actually in the live weight gains, actually around the 0.9 up to then. Probably see it might be a little bit better, hopefully later on. From based on last year, we're probably expecting that the housing weight to be around 542. So I'm kind of happy enough with how they've actually responded. I suppose it was a challenging year this year in that we did have the kind of the drought there earlier on. Then the August then started getting wet. So yeah, things are going okay on that.
And grass plays a huge role in your system that you've highlighted. How do you set up the farm to make the most use of grass?
But one thing with the farm here, and it was kind of the focus we took it from the very start, was on setting up our soil fertility, then our kind of a grazing infrastructure, and then kind of grass management then from there. But on our grazing infrastructure, I would have set out at the very start how many cattle I would plan to put in into every paddock, worked out what their daily demand was going to be. So 2% of their body weight, work it out from there. And then we actually would have had the figure then of about 0.7, 0.8 of a hectare would be required for a day or a day and a half of grass. So from that then we would have divided the paddock into 45 different paddocks. That's actually worked quite well for us because it means it gives me an awful lot more flexibility in the margins of the year, that I can move them on quicker and slower, and they're not going back over grass as well, or they're not within a field for longer than 1 day or 1.5 days. It also means that the ground here can be heavy in parts, so it means that it reduces the level of poaching. But what I found is that being able to put cattle into a paddock for the day and a half, that it works quite well.
JP, you're measuring grass on a weekly basis and recording it on Pasture Base Ireland. What benefits do you see to measuring grass on a weekly basis?
It's great to actually get the bit of forward vision and how things are going. I suppose this year we're at 11 tonnes there produced this year. I suppose to give you a bit of background on that, we started reseeding last year. I suppose the farm was had never been reseeded previously, and I suppose what I really focused on, I was kind of going back to kind of, we were looking at soil fertility, then grazing infrastructure, but then actually onto the grass management. And I suppose finally we wanted to look at the reseeding. And that's kind of where, because we've all the other building blocks in place, I'm now able to kind of focus in on the reseeding and be able to increase the level of grass that's on the farm. But I think working off a permanent pasture, we have 23 acres reseeded last year, so we're getting the real benefit of that this year. But being at 11 tons this year is quite good. I suppose one thing I'd also do is the pre-grazing covers we'll be going into is around 1,100 kilos per hectare. So I like to go into light covers, which we can get in and out of the paddocks very quickly. And like I said, on the margins of the years, that's so important actually for us.
You've highlighted soil fertility as being very important for you. How have you improved soil fertility on the farm in the past?
But I suppose what we do is we do soil testing every 2 years here. So I suppose we've always been quite good in the soil fertility. Being involved in refs previously and in GLOS, that it was part of it. So we've always had the testing done, and we would have applied the lime when required. So that's made a huge benefit to us. And also we would have set up maps for the farm and actually focused on which areas have the correct indexes of P's and K's, and then being able to focus slurry and fertilizer on those areas that were a bit lacking. So that's kind of worked well for us.
And JP, for the winter feeding plan for your farm this winter, how have you improved the quality of your silage, and what steps have you taken to achieve this?
But I suppose there's two main parts to that one, in that with the reseeding, I would have targeted the silage ground last year for reseeding. Also, what that meant was I was able to grow a lot more better quality grass, but also I was going in at the correct time. So this year, our first cut of silage was taken on the 15th of May, and we got a DMD of 75 for our first cut. I suppose on our second cut, our DMD was slightly lower, in that after cutting our first cut of silage, the drought did kick in, and we went off and we would have cut the 1st of June, or sorry, 1st of July. And when we cut on the 1st of July, we saw actually that due to the drought, the grass had got stressed and had actually gone to a bit more stems. So we lost a bit of feed quality in that. But I think it's something that we can actually manage then throughout the winter in relation to how we're going to target this grass or target this silage to some of the finishing stock and supplement with feeding.
And what will you be feeding the 75 DMD silage to?
So it's good actually that we have our options, but I think where I'm going to focus at the moment is our stores, which will be finished, our store cattle, which will be our 28-30 month cattle. We'll use 75 DMD silage with that, and the 70 DMD silage we will use for the weanlings and the cattle that we finished for the 24 month. I suppose the main focus and why we're doing that is that I'm limiting the amount of work that I'll need to do on the farm during the winter, in that I'll only have to feed 2 lots of cattle, and that the stores will be able to manage without any additional supplements with the 75 DMD silage.
And can you talk me through the management of the weanlings from housing now until turnout next spring, and what targets you expect to achieve this winter?
Yeah, well, I suppose what I'm going to do is, based on the silage results anyway, I can see I probably need to supplement that with about 1.2 kgs of meal. So we'll be bringing those cattle in there the middle of November, and I suppose kind of the feeding, I like to keep things quite simple actually for the feeding. So once they come in, we'll bring them onto the silage, introduce our nuts on that. I suppose I'd be hoping at trying to achieve a weight gain of 0.8 throughout the year, or throughout the winter time, and look, hopefully we'll be able to achieve that.
You mentioned that the stores that are coming in now to be finished are targeting 540 kilos now at housing. How do you plan to finish these stock over the winter from housing now to finish?
Yeah, so what we'll do is we'll be splitting these the group into a 50-50 split for the 24 and 28 month. So the 24 month, then we will go in with about 4.5 kgs, and we'll try targeting kind of a 100-day finishing on those cattle. So it means that we can spread out the kill rate or the kill then for the year then throughout the two parts of the year then. So hopefully in around February, March, we'll be able to slaughter those, and then the other ones then will go in around July.
You mentioned that you vaccinate the calves when they come in. What is your health programme and plan for the farm from once you buy in the calf until they're finished?
Well, what we try doing is we vaccinate them then with the intranasal spray. I've been lucky enough that I've never had a huge amount of problem with pneumonia on the farm. I would put that down to kind of the way that we manage the sheds and the way that we have the calves split up throughout their early time on the farm. So I suppose we'd have one shed where we'd have the very young calves, which would just be coming onto the farm, and then they'd move on to a different house then as they get a bit older and while we're weaning them off milk, and then they would move out onto the outer shed. So having 3 different sheds means I can split down the level of risk of any pneumonia or other kind of outbreaks that could actually potentially occur. I suppose kind of we'd have great attention to detail actually when we're minding the calves, in that because they're in groups of 10 and 12, it's very easy to watch them in the morning when we're feeding them, making sure they're in good health, and then just kind of intervening then if needs be at an early stage. Attention to detail is critical, I think, with calves. You can't have never enough eyes on calves at that young age.
And in relation to a dosing programme over the grazing season?
So in the grazing season, what we do is we'd very much kind of, from being the Green Acres programme, focus on taking the dung samples there throughout the grazing season, seeing what the burden is. I suppose I'd be always kind of aware that not to go in too early, give them some level of natural resistance to hoos and stuff, and then to kind of work through that, taking your dung samples and then kind of intervening when required.
And what's the plan for the health programme now from housing?
So what we will do is we will, about 3 weeks before housing, we will go in and dose, and then actually once in housing after about 6 weeks, we'll probably go in again and just make sure that we have everything cleared, so that they're in a good state then, and that there's no major burden on these cattle at any particular time.
JP, you're a member of the Green Acres programme. In your opinion, what are the top 3 tips you would have for farmers in a similar system, and how you've improved your efficiency in your system?
Well, I suppose my thing is to keep the thing very simple. A simple system is very easy to manage. I suppose from my own experience in this, I have 3 groups of animals on the farm. At any one time, they're the calves, year and a halves, and finishing cattle. I suppose kind of how I approached the thing back in 2015, when I originally wanted to focus on, I wanted to do the farm better, I would have set out a plan of what I wanted to do for the next 3 to 4 years. And it was kind of very much identifying what the strengths were, what I had here on the farm, that I was on one block of land, I'd access the calves. I had some paddocks, but I could improve on those. And I had some level of sheds, but I needed to kind of do more work on those as well. So I think that'd be my kind of main thing, is focus on your strengths and keep it as simple as possible. And that's so important, I think, actually, to having a beef system that runs very efficiently. I suppose my main target on the farm is to run the farm on 16 to 18 hours per week on the average. And I can achieve this by doing this, actually, by keeping the very simple system. And I suppose that's kind of the main thing where there is the profitability in beef. It's based very much around how many hours of labour do you have to apply to the farm for it to work.
I think keeping it simple is a practical tip that can be taken on by any farming system. And as you mentioned, attention to detail is critical, particularly in this system, but is important in any beef production system. Thanks, JP.
Thank you.
That's all for this week's episode, and my thanks to JP for joining me on the show. You can catch up on all other shows and interviews from the Beef Edge podcast on the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie, or you can listen on Apple and Google podcasts as well as Spotify. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe so you never miss a show. For all other updates from our beef programme, keep an eye on our Twitter and Facebook pages. Until next time, I'm Catherine Egan, and thanks for listening.